融聚智慧，方能融创价值。融你我，融无限。江苏银行。
Hi, I'm Jussi Cannon. I'm a Christie's auctioneer, and you're watching Whose Time? You're watching Whose Time? A source of inspiration.
全球领先的国际拍卖行佳士得呢，在今年迎来了他的250岁生日。佳士得是由英国的拍卖师詹姆斯·佳士得在1766年成立的，从一家本地的拍卖行逐步发展成为国际艺术市场的权威机构。目前呢，已经在纽约、巴黎、香港、上海、北京像这样全球最重要的城市设立了办事处。佳士得的现任全球总裁彭凯南是一位有着30多年从业经验的资深艺术专家。他1984年毕业于牛津大学的英国文学系，1986年加入佳士得，曾经先后呢在早期绘画与现代版画部门、印象派与现代艺术部门任职。2005年被任命为佳士得的欧洲总裁，2015年出任佳士得的全球总裁。就在不久前呢，彭凯南来到北京出席佳士得北京全新艺术空间的揭幕仪式，并在此后接受了我们财新时间的专访。而话题呢，就从佳士得成立250周年的故事开始谈起。
Congratulations on the 250th anniversary. Please briefly tell us the initial story of your founder.
Of James Christie?
Yes.
So he was a sailor, a 30-year-old man, a Scotsman, who came to London looking for a career. He was a great, very theatrical human being, and he wanted to become involved in the art world. So he joined an auction house in Covent Garden in the old part of London, and very quickly realised that he could be the best in the world, at least the known world at the time. And there were 200 auctioneers in London when he started in the early 1760s. And in 1766, when he started his business, suddenly many of them found that they had this young man who was challenging them as the greatest auctioneer in the country. And of course, everything was being sold by auction at that time. When there was a death, or when a porcelain factory or a silversmith was in financial trouble, then the objects would be disposed of by auction. And James Christie found himself as the man that everybody wanted to be their auctioneer, because the auctioneer brings so much to that moment of sale and can make objects so much more expensive. Very quickly he became the friend of great aristocrats in England. He put the auction house right in the middle of the most significant part of the city in London, on Pall Mall, just near the palace, St James's Palace and also Buckingham Palace. And he very quickly started to sell very major works of art to those aristocrats who had all been travelling in the New World and across the known world, the ancient world, on the Grand Tour. So they were very interested in very important historical artefacts. And James Christie became the man that everybody went to. And what he brought to auction is something that we cherish at Christie's, which is the theatre of auction, and the ability of the auctioneer to have a relationship with the people that are both selling the works of art but also buying the works of art.
Inherited.
Perhaps. It's something that's very fundamental to Christie's. The training of our auctioneers is very important. And every season we have young auctioneers from Christie's that come and train and try and become part of the group that sells across the world, whether it's here in China or in Hong Kong or in America, Switzerland, London or elsewhere for Christie's. We have 12 sale rooms around the world, and for each of the young people that joins us, the greatest aspiration is to be James Christie.
Are the cultures melting well at Christie's?
We are probably the most multicultural business in the world. We employ people from all over the globe. We have many Asians working, for example, in London and New York. So I think perhaps in the 1980s when I joined Christie's, we were a very English company. And today we're a very multicultural company, which is, I think, incredibly important. Today's world is about building bridges between cultures. It makes it both exciting for people, but it's also very educational. And Christie's is a business that is really a cultural exchange. Our task is to really bring cultures together and to show the very best of each of our cultures to one another. I can remember some 15 years ago, we had an exhibition in London of masterpieces. And in that exhibition, we had 13th century illuminated manuscripts from France and England, which is really the beginning of Western artistic culture. And in another room next door, we had a group of bronzes that came from 1600 before Christ, Chinese bronzes. And I explained to the press that it took the rest of the world 27 centuries to become as sophisticated as China. And for me, that was a really incredible and extraordinary moment of realization of how little work we had done in China. And so it's wonderful for us to have been able in 2013 to bring the cultural exchange about.
作为佳士得首屈一指的拍卖师，彭凯南在艺术品市场保持着几项非常惊人的拍卖记录。他是唯一一位1年之内拍卖额超过20亿美元的拍卖师。他曾经表示，拍卖师呢会从一次又一次的拍卖经验中掌握3个关键点，即迅速、沉着和果断。然而，即便如此，最资深的拍卖师在登上佳士得拍卖台的那一瞬间，也会心跳加速。
A question for yourself. So you are the face of Christie's auctioneering. You once said auctioneering is quite simply the most enjoyable, exciting part of my work. And like skydiving, everyone should try it at least once in their lifetime. Why?
Skydiving and auctioneering. The interesting thing about auctioneering is that you are in front of an audience, perhaps of over 1,000 people. They all want to communicate with you, particularly when they're wanting to buy, and yet you don't have an immediate relationship with them. So it's rather like being an actor without any lines. So that moment when you're trying to, how would I put it, generate excitement and interest around a wonderful object, and then looking out into the audience is a moment where you have to create a relationship very quickly. You develop a 7th or 8th sense. You immediately know when you look out into this crowd of 1,000 people, which 5 or 6 people are going to bid. They change their posture. They become interested in you, and they are very keen to acquire the work of art. And so every moment, every 60 seconds that you sell a major work of art, you have to start again. So as you start the bidding on an object, it's really, you let go, and you have nothing to hold on to. You just have to see how the bidding goes, how you can generate interest, how you can create competition between 2 collectors that want to buy the piece. A lot of people say that they're nervous about coming into a sale. I can assure you they're not as nervous as the auctioneer.
How to evaluate art pieces by the auction house?
How does one price works of art? Well, the art market is rather interesting. It's a completely open market, a transparent market, where the value of works of art is defined not by Christie's, but by the collectors. So the collectors will look at a piece of glass or a piece of porcelain, know who makes the piece of glass, know what has been paid for this before, and if it was to become rarer over the years, they will compete to create a price level that they think is acceptable at that particular time. Now, of course, fashion, if this type of glass goes out of fashion, then it drops in value. On the other hand, if people from the Middle East, Russia and China become interested in this type of glass and come into the market, then it pushes the price higher. So really our pricing at Christie's reflects what collectors are prepared to pay for works of art. And sometimes that changes. And then, of course, the next time that we offer this piece of glass, we'll adjust the price. So that we offer not in any way by our own view of what an object is worth. For example, why is Van Gogh more or less expensive than Picasso? It's a very interesting psychological question which we're still looking for the answer for. We don't know.
What about new auction categories such as the wine and the watches?
Watches. These are the Chinese urbanite increasingly were buying into.
Yes. I suppose that watches have always been collectible. Men love to buy watches, perhaps as women love to buy handbags, which we also sell, and shoes. The interesting thing is that some of our biggest collectors of handbags are actually men. And similarly, many of the collectors of watches prefer to buy ladies' watches and are females. So I think it's just about how we look at life individually. I don't think there's any particular explanation. When it comes to wines, of course, wines are like music. As you listen to music and become more engaged in it, so you want to learn more. And as you want to learn more, you go to different performances, you listen to different performances of the same piece by Mozart, by Beethoven, by a different orchestra, and you see the nuances, the differences between the two productions of the same piece. So with wines, one of the beauties of it is that it's an endless arena in which you can, if you like, judge your own personal view of a change in the nuance of the music, and you then decide yourself which wines you prefer. So sometimes people think that buying wine is just about the drinking of it. I can assure you it's not. It's about the appreciation of the, how to put it, the response to the wine when you're drinking it. It's very complicated, just like great tea, if I may say, or any great foods. If you're a real gourmet and you love food, you will come to different parts of the world and seek to taste the finest foods in each region. So the same thing is with wine. It's a fascinating.
There are challenges like this online challenge, selling arts online, and you have this Christie Live system, and you have competitors like Amazon or Artsy or all these online kind of data providers. Online is a big topic here in China.
Online has been a big topic for me ever since my children became teenagers and started to work online, buying objects and works of art and looking at things. eBay has done amazing things for the auction market. It has introduced many, many more people to the concept of being able to compete for an object, buy it and acquire it, whether it's sports shoes or whether it's small art objects and so forth. So I'm a great believer in e-commerce. At Christie's, we have the most developed e-commerce platform of any of the great traditional auction houses. And actually our Christie's Live portal, which has won awards and is fantastic, most of our collectors follow the auction online, so they can see me. I am sort of live on TV, if you like, whenever I take a sale. So we have bidders now buying online with us live, watching the auctioneer and bidding for over £1 million and buying works of art. So what has happened is that the world has become properly global. And a lot of the collectors that are coming into Christie's, around 25%, now actually introduce themselves to collecting and to Christie's through Christie's Live. For any of your audience that are able to tap into it, please do. Watch the sales. We have.
近年来，受全球动荡的政治环境和低迷的经济形势的影响，拍卖业的表现可以讲不尽如人意。欧元区的经济持续疲软，大宗商品价格下跌，人民币贬值等等因素，都给全球的艺术品市场蒙上了一层阴影。黄金时代似乎难以再现了。那么，彭凯南又是如何看待目前全球艺术品市场现状的呢？
Let's shift to the state of the world art market, which doesn't seem to be that rosy, and it's increasingly hard to fetch masterpieces in the past few years. Is that right? And what's the reason?
Over the past 5 years, more masterpieces have been sold on the art market than ever before. And what we're seeing today was a slight correction as of late last year, which was driven by a fall in the oil price, some uncertainty in the financial markets. What led to was a lack of confidence amongst people that owned works of art to sell. It didn't actually mean there was any drop in price of the value of works. It was really a question as to whether individuals that owned the works of art wanted to sell them with us. In the previous year, I sold 2 works of art for over £100 million. The first time it's ever happened. So when I read people saying that the art market is in some sort of difficult place, I think they're probably not people that really understand what has been going on. I never dreamt in my lifetime that anybody would sell a work of art for over 100 million, let alone 2 in 1 year. And if somebody had said to me it was going to be me, I would have just laughed and said, now they're being absurd. So what we're seeing at the moment is a correction driven by economic circumstances affecting sellers. But in terms of the buyers, our buyer statistics are at the highest they've been for several years. So the appetite to buy is much greater than the works of art that are coming into the market. You read people saying that the financial markets, the economies, interest rates, and the art world are somehow in a depressed state. I can assure you it's not the case for the art world.
I think it's partly benefited by this macro environment in which lots of liquidity and lack of kind of safe assets.
Yes, and the safest asset in the world perhaps is a Picasso, because a Picasso will always be a Picasso, and a Monet will always be a Monet. And if you put your money into stocks and shares or into companies that may not be in a very healthy state, it's probably a riskier asset, art objects, and that's obviously what's driven the diamond price, that's what's driven property prices, and that's what continues to drive art prices. And particularly when the interest rates are very low, then the alternatives for people with a lot of capital aren't very great. So they look at fixed assets that have a significant store of value. And of course, art objects are those. A Picasso will always be a Picasso.
Inequality, which is arguably the biggest challenge nowadays. How do you feel about this inequality issue? And is the industry affected?
I think that the art world is a great leveller. The most celebrated and important tourist destination in England is the Tate Gallery, the Modern Art Museum. And any great city in the world that wants to reach out to the broadest possible global population must have a museum. The museum has to be free. It has to give access to people from every different part of the community. And it needs to have a great children's education program. And we very frequently at Christie's have children education programs around our exhibitions. We do a huge amount of work with the museums. We organise a lot of loans. And when it comes to collecting, oftentimes people presume that buying works of art from Christie's is only about buying expensive works. You can buy works of art from us for a few £100, for a few $100, all the way up to obviously very expensive works. Christie's has over 1 million clients, and we sell in many, many categories. And collecting, for me, is a way of life for everybody. We all collect something. We might collect fashion, we might collect shoes, we might collect works of art, we might collect stamps. All of us collect. And really what Christie's is trying to do is bring people together. So when people talk about social change, I feel very much that the art world and the arts is fundamental to everybody's ability to communicate. Art is an apolitical language. I feel very strongly about this, as you can see. Art is a very apolitical language, and it's a great combiner. It brings people together. It's a great leveller. And social change oftentimes is driven through art, through literature, through music, and through painting.
目前啊，中国已经成为全球规模最大、发展也最为迅速的艺术品市场之一了。根据统计，2016年上半年，中国艺术品的成交总额为23亿美元，在全球市场份额中呢，占高达35%的比例，并且位居全球之首。佳士得从很早就开始布局中国业务，1994年进入大陆地区，先后在上海、北京设立办事处。2013年在上海举行中国内地的首场拍卖，成为首家在中国内地开展拍卖业务的国际拍卖行。今年刚刚上任的佳士得中国区主席蔡金青在接受专访时，就详细解读了中国艺术品市场的特点。
我是佳士得中国区主席蔡金青，欢迎收看财新时间。财新时间只给你最有价值的思想。
Can you describe the Chinese market at the moment?
China art market is still in early stage of development. If you think about Christie's has been developing art market for 250 years. Chinese market only started 20 years ago. So there's still a long way of long-term growth with the wealth creation in the period of unprecedented history in China, with the taste changing, more people embracing international art. We feel long-term Chinese art market will continue to grow.
Having said that, there are many international exhibitions that are coming here to China on cultural exchanges, which is magnificent. And to Jingjing's point, it's just a question of time before the market here involves so many more people. And the education piece is the next one, where the children and the university students get more and more involved, which they're doing already. So you will see a generational shift here, and it will be the young generation of Chinese that will decide the future of the cultural world in this country. And that's happening all over the world. And it's the young artists that are dominating the art world in Britain, in Germany, in France, in Spain, in America. And that's why contemporary art is so vibrant right now. And actually we see that here in China as well.
How do you see the local competition from the other auction house like Baoli, Poly in China?
I think they're formidable players in the art market. In such a short time, they become world top 5 auction houses, both Poly and Guardian. And we watch our competitors very closely, and they have been very innovative in developing the Chinese market, bringing a lot of new people to art collecting, which is good for everybody. And meantime, they're also, embarked upon an international expansion. Now they all doing sales in Hong Kong, which actually make Hong Kong a very convenient place for art collectors. And we hope, with the market more open in China, we'll be able to engage and interact with them in this market. I think the more players, the healthier the market.
Jinqing makes a very good point. We don't see the other auctioneers or the dealers or the museums as competitors. It's all part of the same community, and the more people that can be introduced to it, the better. Having said that, there is also the situation that many of the people that work in the art world have been trained at Christie's, which also creates a standard. The Christie's standard is very, very high, and we're very singular about that. And it's fantastic for us, although sad, when some of our staff or our younger members of teams decide to go and work at another business, whether they set up as private dealers on their own or whether they join the museums or other auction houses. But having said that, we know that there's a Christie's standard that runs through the art world, which is incredibly important. It keeps the standards very high, and it makes sure that questions of authenticity, questions of provenance and so forth are dealt with in the appropriate fashion, which is incredibly important in the art world.
And are there any recommendations for Chinese riches on collecting what kind of market is more in fashion?
Follow your heart. Follow your heart, collect the things that give you pleasure, and you will find that there are other people in the world that will want to collect the same, and you'll become part of a community. The wonderful thing about the art world is that if you're a Chinese collector or an American collector, you'll be interested in porcelain, say, and you then have a universal language. You may come from a very different walk of life, completely different background, but you have this incredible shared passion for porcelain, whether it's Chinese or international porcelain. And that lingua franca becomes what glues you to other people. So as you travel around the world, you go to museum collections, museum openings, you go to Christie's sales, you go to auctions at any of the major auctioneers, you will meet the same people, and you create this incredible bond and friendship, which is lasting and very, very meaningful.
We talk about this top of the range kind of collector. What about these newer collectors? What kind of categories should they invest in? And does Christie offer that kind of help?
Yeah, we find the newer generation of collectors, their interests are much more diverse. They could go into wine, handbags, jewelry, or they could go into international contemporary art. The interest is very broad because of their lifetime experience. A lot of people, especially the younger generation, they traveled abroad, they studied abroad, they graduated from U.S. colleges and then coming back. And so they don't have a sort of a blind spot about, and they're very aware of what the international trends are. So I think this is becoming more and more converging as one market. So what we're doing here is, in a way, of course, we tailor to Chinese interests and needs, but more and more we found, it's the same. The collectors demand the same as in Paris, New York, London. This become a much more sophisticated collecting group here.
An interesting issue is counterfeit, which is traditionally a huge issue in China. But I recently know one of the two major auction houses actually put some fake on sale. It turned out it's judged better than the original, or it's not inferior. So how do you see the counterfeit situation in China?
Should I answer that?
And first, worldwide, yeah.
So globally, Christie's guarantees every work of art that it sells, whether it sells in China or in Geneva, in Hong Kong. We have the same policy globally. So if you buy something from Christie's, it is guaranteed for a period of 7 years. Very important. We have, for 250 years, been incredibly careful about issues relating to authenticity and provenance. We will continue to do that for the next 250 wherever we operate. But it is true that there are brilliant counterfeiters. We've been involved in identifying forgers and so forth many times over 250 years. It's part of the art world, but a very small part of the art world, which of course attracts a lot of attention when it happens. And I'm sorry for other businesses where it's happened recently. We understand that it can happen to anybody. We're very vigilant.
So how will you position China in your next 250 years?
Well, I was very fortunate. For 10 years, Francois Pinault and the team at Christie's gave me the opportunity to develop what I believed were businesses in countries where there was a lot of opportunity for buyers to get engaged in Christie's. The one greatest challenge that I knew we would face, and perhaps I would be allowed to lead it, would be China. And so it's a great honor for me to be here opening our office in Beijing and working with Jin Qingai, with Rebecca Wei, and with some of the really fantastically professional members of the Christie's team here. But I actually wait for the moment when we can have our first great sales in the mainland, whether it's in Shanghai or here in Beijing. It will be a tremendous part of my career at Christie's. After 30 years, it's one of the few things that I really look forward to achieving. I never thought I would sell a painting for £100 million. I've managed to do that by great fortune, and the next fortune would be if I could also witness the opening of the Chinese art market and be a small part of that over the few decades to come.